Thursday, March 26th, was a big day for the Canadian military and the Canadian government as Mark Carney announced that for the first time in a long time, decades, we had hit our 2% of GDP in national defense spending. Now, while all that's going on, some people are talking about whether or not Canada should have a nuclear weapon system like a lot of other countries. To talk more about it, thrilled to be joined, as always, by Paul Micucci. Paul, how are you?
Good, Jim. How are you doing?
Good, good. It was a big day in Halifax.
Yeah.
A long time coming. It wasn't that long ago where we were at 1% of the GDP, about 12 years ago or so. So to be at 2%, I know it doesn't seem like a lot, but when you're talking about 2% of our GDP, that's a significant increase in spending.
Oh, it is a huge increase. And you know, we're talking about this year, this fiscal year, going to $60 billion, Jim.
Which was unheard of just a few years ago.
And over 5 years, getting to $80 billion.
Correct.
So we haven't made them, but we are about to, apparently, from the Prime Minister's announcement today. And, you know, saying NATO had acknowledged that we hit our 2% mark and everything. We're about to make commitments, it looks like. We've set up a group. We've set up a structure to make procurement of all these weapons, personnel. It'd be great to have, as I mentioned on previous shows, it'd be great to have a spreadsheet that said, here's how I get the $60 billion. Because quite frankly, I listened to the speech today. It was a good speech. You know, again, he's a good orator. He's getting better all the time.
Yes.
But quite frankly, I'm trying to kind of add it up in my head. You know, I used to be really good with numbers, and I'm trying to figure out, okay, does that add to 60 billion? I got to about 30 billion.
Correct.
And I'm like, okay, I'm not going any further now. So now I can't kind of close it. Then I pulled some stuff up online, and I said, okay, is there a breakdown of the $62 billion? No, there really isn't. So I couldn't find that. There are documents where you kind of patch together bits and pieces, like you figure out the NORAD system's getting $2 billion. We have $20 billion in personnel and readiness and operations costs, but you don't really see the big picture. And that's the challenge with me right now. I'm trying to I love what he's doing. I think we need to do it. I want them to recruit more people. I want them to build better housing for these people. I want them to be paid more money. I want young people to join the Canadian Armed Forces and do amazing things. Do I think it's smart that he went down to Atlantic Canada, did the announcement? You said it before the show. Atlantic Canada needs the jobs.
I mean, if they're building ships and servicing submarines and the infrastructure jobs to actually build the facilities and then do the work in there, the welders, that's for the maritime economy. That's huge, Paul.
It is huge. You know, and I had to laugh because David McGuinty and the Prime Minister came into the hangar, and behind them was this massive ship.
Yeah.
Right. And what a great picture, because they walked kind of in unison, 8 feet apart down towards the hangar. Yeah. And then they came through the middle of the forces. And that type of stuff I love. Whoever did the PR on that, good for them. But I need a little more detail. So it's, sharpen up. I know there's online, you're seeing a lot of people kind of right now, a lot of chirping about, well, you bought guns. Okay, well, what did the guns cost? Where'd you get the guns from? Like a little bit of detail here would be great, right?
You're referencing Murray Brewster from the CBC, who's their longtime senior military reporter, quite frankly, went in a frustrated thread on X, Twitter, how frustrated he is. He just asked a simple question for a breakdown of they're buying 50,000 new assault rifles for the military at a cost of almost $320 billion. And he just... $1 million. He's asking, simple questions. He can't get an answer. And he says, I'm quite frustrated. No one will let me know the breakdown of it.
Tell Murray to watch the show that you and I did, asking the same questions, because you and I had the show. Yeah. When the budget came out, you and I did a budget show on the financial breakdown of the defense budget. And I thought it was clearer at that point. It got muddier after, quite frankly, they set up the new commission and to oversee all the expenditures and everything else. I think it got a little muddy again. So I think, I agree with them. We need to kind of go back and clean that up. But, it's interesting. So your second point when in the monologue, when you brought the show in, was a really good point, because the last few days, the discussion about nuclear has hit the airwaves. And President Macron, I don't know if you've followed this. and Britain have been kind of in this weird dialogue where he's kind of saying to Britain, you know, I'm going to use nuclear as a deterrent. He's saying a nuclear deterrent. You know, for those of you who don't know much, France is a powerhouse like us.
Very much so.
You know, kind of in the world, there's us and France, and there's probably, well, no, I don't think China, but us and France.
Germany was, and then they got rid of all of it. They got rid of all of them.
They got rid of it. They went the wrong direction on that one. So, you know, we've kind of advanced, us with the CANDU reactor and the small reactors. We've done a really good job in nuclear and advancing our energy, nuclear. But so has France.
Yes.
And so he said in the last few days, you know, I'm going to use it as a deterrent. Now, a lot of that is to do with the war going on in the Ukraine between Russia. You know, there's lots of scuttlebutt that Russia talks sometimes about its dislike of Europe and, you know, that the potential nuclear use in Europe. So there has been lots of discussion on the airwaves about that over the last few months. You know, I listened to it. I think we all listened to it. But, you know, that's kind of one of those things you listen to, and then unfortunately, we all grown to discount it. And then yesterday, Kim Jong-un, right? He came out and he was going on and saying, I was right. So he's like, I was right because look at Iran.
Yeah.
Right. The same thing would have happened to me if I would have got rid of my nuclear weapons that have happened now to Iran. And that's all the more reason that I don't listen to this sweet talk from the Americans, and I amped up in nuclear. And he was doing a big speech to his people. And, you know, I kind of listened to the news and I watched it. And, you know, a lot of his stuff, you know, I'm always looking for Dennis Rodman when I see him and, you know, to pop up. But, you know, you kind of discount it, right?
Here's the issue with, I think, with someone like North Korea thinking it's going to keep them safe. I guess in some ways it will keep them safe. But if he's willing to destroy his own country to launch nuclear weapons against someone who tries to take, that's what would happen. Unfortunately, if you use them, the other countries, your country's dead. It's gone. It goes back to something from the 1950s, mutually assured destruction. Right. So if you have nuclear weapons as a deterrent, that means that at some point you would be willing to use them. So for the countries that have them, they have them knowing that if someone did something to their country, their last resort is to unlock the key, hit the button, and see what is left of their country afterwards. I can't envision any scenario where any Canadian politician would take the step to have nuclear weapons on our soil. Now, we had them in Europe in the 1960s.
Yes, tell us.
Because at the time in the Cold War, we had a huge military presence in West Germany, and the Americans had so many nuclear weapons stockpiled there. They kind of told us, like, hey, unless you're willing to do this, this, and this, you're going to do this. So it was cheaper for the Canadian government at the time in the 60s to allow them to put an American nuclear bomb on a Canadian fighter jet in Lahr, Germany. So they had a number of planes at the end of the runway, a CF-104G starfighter that was licensed built at Canadair in Montreal with Canadian pilots and Canadian crews, and it was guarded by American service people with weapons and dogs. And in case of war, they had X amount of minutes to be in the plane and arm the weapon as they fly towards the target and drop it. Now, the planes didn't have enough gas to get back to base.
No.
That they would get a little bit back, eject, and have to walk back to the base if they could. But that's what the reality of the Cold War was. And then eventually Pierre Trudeau said, I don't want to be part of this anymore. So he opted out. But for a good decade, we had Canadian pilots and Canadian planes who would practice what it would be like if they got the call and had to fly into East Germany or Poland and drop these weapons.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes.
Okay. Wow. That's something I never heard. Yeah.
They don't want to talk about it, but
Yeah.
my dad lived it because he was stationed over there when I was born, and he was in transport command, and they would fly, and you would see the planes at the end of the runway, the big yellow circle, and two big sergeants with weapons and M16s and dogs. And my dad casually asked one day, what would happen if I crossed the line? He goes, I would shoot you, and then that dog would drag your dead body across the other side of the yellow line. Because unless you had a special lanyard with a special ID, it was shoot to kill. because there was an American nuclear weapon in the belly of a Canadian fighter jet.
Wow.
And it was a one-way mission to drop it and then maybe get back. So to do it now.
So most Canadians don't know that.
They don't know that.
Oh, okay. Wow. That's crazy.
To do it now, Paul, there's only 3 ways to adequately use a nuclear weapon. The ballistic missiles or cruise missiles.
Yep.
We don't have any of those.
No.
A specialized ballistic missile submarine. We don't have those. We've been waiting decades to order a simple submarine, let alone a ballistic missile submarine, which is 10 times more expensive or more sophisticated, or specialized planes. So we'd have to create a whole new infrastructure within the military for a nuclear deterrence and weapons delivery, which right now we don't have as a country.
Yeah. And I think you made a good point early, Jim. You know, and I had the opportunity a few months ago to spend some time listening to Dr. Ivana Hughes. And she did a really great, she has a book, a couple books, I think now. And she did a great podcast on nuclear winter.
Yes.
So, and it was scary. It's stuff I didn't even know about the climate cooling effects. It really does create, the smoke and the fires that happen after. And then from there, it actually goes to just like literally the atmosphere cools down.
Oh, yeah.
And then
mini ice age.
And then everything dies.
But and if you didn't see that podcast, Annie Jacobson wrote a book about the nuclear war from the time there's a warning to launch and the aftermath. And it describes that. And it's the most chilling, frightening thing I've ever read, that if anyone actually does a nuclear exchange, 2 countries, say it's India and Pakistan, which are both armed with nuclear weapons, we would the fallout would hit us in North America. People don't think that, but it would, because it goes into the atmosphere.
Yeah. It is the nuclear winter for the global world.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and I look at it and I think to myself, well, I understand why we agreed. I understand where reasonable minds years ago came to the opinion not to do it. Now we do a good job of all the safeties and securities with our nuclear energy. And Canada. So let's it's interesting. Over the last 50 years or more, we've done a great job. Whether it's Ontario, which it's Darlington and Bruce plants, and Pickering. Yeah. We've done an amazing job. And, our energy capabilities, and I took a look, I was curious because I'm going somewhere with this.
Okay.
I was trying to figure out how many megawatts of energy we have. And I was like, I wonder what we're at. So we have 6,200 megawatts in Bruce, Darlington, 3,500, and up to 3,100 in Pickering. And then in New Brunswick, we have 660 in Atlantic Canada.
Yeah.
So we have a massive amount of energy produced by nuclear plants, nuclear power plants.
Including all the hydroelectric, the Churchill Falls and everything else.
Yeah. So you look at like this is, so then I started going, okay, and we've all been very proud of how the CANDU reactors have gone to South Korea, Romania, China, Argentina. And people have that's one thing that people have really grabbed on to Canada and said, these guys really know what they're doing when it comes to safe nuclear, carbon clean, high efficiency, especially in the CANDU reactor, which is uranium and heavy water, with a high neutron efficiency. It's really neat technology.
And it's been around since the 60s.
It's the 60s, but we've perfected it.
Yeah.
And we're now, the Stephen Lecce and the Pickering guys, we're now building small modular reactors at it's expensive, but for energy at a really good price in record times.
And so for remote areas of farming communities in Ontario, far northern Ontario, the areas that are far away from those central areas, they have access to constant clean energy.
Exactly. So, which is, it's interesting. So now this is going to give us a capability. So now this is where my mind went. So, I'm going to step back for a minute and explain how I got there. But, I was sitting there on the couch and I'm watching every night like you do. I'm sitting there and I flip between CNN, Fox. I do my nightly flip.
I'm a BBC guy, but I get it.
Yeah, BBC. It's on my channel list, and I go through and I watch a few minutes to see if there's anything new and interesting happening. So I started watching. It was a series, and I think it was on Bloomberg.
Okay.
Yeah, Bloomberg was doing a show, and they were doing a show about the Iron Dome.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking to myself, I heard the Iron Dome. I don't really know much about it. So, I started watching it, and I was shocked. And even today when I came in, I asked everyone, do you know what the Iron Dome is? And I realized I didn't really know a lot about the Iron Dome. But I'm sitting there and I'm watching, and we're going to put it up on the screen today so people can learn about the Iron Dome. But then I'm sitting there watching, and I'm watching them with these huge trucks bringing these missiles, these rockets, and basically these hydraulic launchers.
It looks like a dump truck when it tips
It looks
up.
like a dump truck. It looks like, I was a sanitation engineer one summer, so I know dump trucks. So I'm sitting there watching this dump truck type technology go down, and then I see them loading, and then it goes back up, and the guys with all their pads and gadgets, kind of like my pad here, running around with the safety helmets and the goggles on, and they're sitting there, and then all of a sudden they fire, and they intersect the incoming missile.
It's an incredible piece of defensive hardware. Incredible.
It is, but I couldn't get over how manual it was. And you had the control system, and you had, these launchers, you had the people, you had the rocket systems detecting. There's a lot to it, right? And when they set them up, they go out into the middle of these fields, and they set these they're like outposts.
Yeah, they are
with different machines. They have the rockets, the transportation systems, the detection systems, the control systems, and they have the launchers. So they set them all up in these fields, and then they're sitting there and they're launching them off, and they're strategically putting, I guess, around wherever they're trying to protect. So it's a very manual process. It's not, when I thought Iron Dome originally, when they said it, I thought to myself, oh, this is like a dome that goes over, and no, it's not.
And once the missiles are done, guess what? Someone's got to reload it.
Yeah, there's a bunch of guys, moving, lifting, working. I'm thinking to myself, this is kind of crazy. And then I'm watching the show, and they start talking about, okay, if we go to Iran and we go to Israel right now, they have the Iron Dome. They have David Sling. They have the Arrow 2 and the Arrow 3 systems, and they have THAAD.
Yeah, which is an American system as well as the Patriot missile system.
Right. So then I'm thinking to myself, I wonder what the difference, I wonder what they all are. So then I got curious because I'm sitting there, and so I started, doing some research into it. Well, the interesting part, and we're going to put it up also on the screen for today, the interesting part that I learned is they all have different capabilities based on missile distance range and altitude.
Yes, and speed and everything.
So, if I go back here, the THAAD is for extra high altitude alongside the Israel system. So they use it for very high altitude missiles. And then the Iron Dome is for short range, low altitude.
Yes.
So the stuff that they're shooting across the water and
from Lebanon too.
And from Lebanon. So it really is used for really quick response to short range missiles. Yeah. Let's call it. David Sling is medium range and more advanced. So it has a more advanced. So you can only imagine right now they're sitting there, and there's a bunch of guys loading all these systems, and they're shooting them up and so we said, why is this so expensive and why so costly? Well, we don't see any of that because they don't want to show us where the locations are. But I started watching it, and I was just shocked.
And Paul, as sophisticated as all that is, they don't get every missile and drone.
Well, how could they?
It's not possible. So even if it's at their very peak, they maybe get 90 to 95%. That means 5 to 10%. That's what you see in the news when you see explosions on American bases and in Tel Aviv and different parts of Israel, because some get through.
Well, and the terrible part of this, the other day you saw the Air Canada and the fire truck, at LaGuardia. You know what? Human error.
Absolutely.
right? And you can see it. Like you know, we were all listening to that. You know, stop. He's telling.
He was doing 3 jobs at that night.
Three jobs, and he did, you know, picked it up late, but he had 4 or 5 seconds. He was trying to get him. That gentleman driving the fire truck didn't look right. There's a whole bunch. There's a sequence of mishaps that lead to accidents, right? Now you can only imagine. So imagine this: like you now have potentially 5 different missile systems in play.
Yes.
Right. Versions. The Arrow 2 and 3, they roughly do the same thing. They're different versions, but
by the way, Canada has none of that. 0.
Well, no, that's
0. So if anyone fired anything into our country against Montreal, Toronto, Calgary, Vancouver, we don't have anything on our soil for the military's been begging for it for years. There's nothing to stop anything to hit any city in Canada. Not a thing.
Exactly. Well, you know, water. We're divided by, you know, we have a big land mass or water mass between us. But you know, so the interesting part of this is I'm watching and I'm thinking to myself, my goodness, can you imagine the logistical nightmare that occurs in these places when these go on? Because you have 5 different systems. That means you probably have hundreds of people that are trying to logistically ship, locate, place, fire, connect, and then you have the breakdowns of technology. You know, coming into the show, you know, just coming into the show, the amount of logistical glitches we had just to scan a document to get the show off. You know, and I think to myself, imagine if you were, how much you'd be sweating is every day you had to make sure your missile detection system was up and running, working perfectly, calibrated, because you can imagine the physics with which these things are determined off it. So, you know, you have to have if your trajectory is wrong, you're going to miss that incoming missile, right?
And Paul, they don't know, if you're in Israel and you're using all those defense systems, they are assuming they're conventionally armed weapons. They don't know. I mean, as of now, we don't think Iran has nuclear capability. It only takes one.
Oh, yeah.
It would only take one. And they don't, talk about pressure.
Well, you know, and it's interesting because you're telling the story, which is a great segue. This, you know, we didn't even talk about it. You just told the story about your dad in that conversation.
Yeah.
But, you know, we're talking about our story in Canada, the fact that we did have nuclear bombs.
In Germany, yeah.
Yeah. And we had them in planes.
Yep.
Canadian planes. And
Canadian crews, Canadian pilots.
How did we ever know if there were any, like the fact that you can put it in a plane, ship it somewhere, and it's there, like only a few people know that, right? Like at some point, like that's a very top secret. So the transportation of...
Yeah, so they were American weapons. America had so many over there, they basically drove them in secure trucks to the Canadian Forces Base, Lahr, Germany, and basically here was the thing, and they had them permanently attached to the belly of a couple planes every day.
Yeah.
They were always at ready to go.
Yeah. Well, but
for years.
But you know, the fact that they could be shipped like anywhere, means they could be, you know, they could be on a boat and arrive in any country. You won't know until they arrive. So you know, then I started thinking, I'm listening to this, and the fact that you're saying Canada, we don't have anything.
No.
So as we're talking about detection systems and Arctic security and everything, I'm starting to think to myself, okay, right? Who has looked at nuclear and weapons? So I start to kind of put those together, and not nuclear bombs. So because when I'm thinking of nuclear, I'm thinking of it differently now.
Okay.
Because like after, you know, Dr. Hughes's book and her podcast, and, you know, you've read it. You mentioned the other author that you read.
Andy Jacobson.
Yeah. You kind of say to yourself, well, you know, a nuclear bomb, but that would destroy the world. So quite frankly, you know, if that's your purpose, not much we can do with that. That's just going to happen. And, you know, if you had one, I guess you get to, you know, let it off too. That's really what it is. But I'm thinking of using nuclear energy because the energy you need to actually run a system of defense is massive. So then I started, you remember the old Battlestar Galactica?
Of course.
Then I started searching around. I said, okay, I'm going to take a look and I'm going to see if anyone's doing laser technology for weapons. And you know what? They are.
But the research has been going on for years.
The research is going, and they're getting closer and closer. But you know what?
They call them in the military, they call it direct energy weapon.
Direct energy weapons.
Yeah,
You're
so
right.
you and I call it a laser.
Yeah.
So they call it a direct energy weapon that could hit a tank, hit a ship, hit a plane, hit a missile, and destroy it.
And what's the challenge they're having?
Well, it's the
energy.
The energy.
The energy. And what are we good at? Energy, right?
Yeah.
So then I started kind of connecting the two, and I'm saying, okay, so now and you mentioned it earlier on the show, as we're taking our small reactors and we're putting them in the Arctic, we're putting them in, we're a big landmass.
We're putting them everywhere.
Putting them everywhere. We're 9 million square kilometers or whatever it is. We're a huge landmass, second in the world only to Russia. So now, as we start placing them all around, we can use that power and we can use our detection systems and we can place laser weaponry to at least shoot down. Because here's my reason on it. Because my reasoning on it, for a defense system, if we're going to go to the Iron Dome, which I don't think we are, I think that was a Trump, use our Iron Dome. The Iron Dome's an okay system, but it's not really effective for what we're going to be seeing. We're going to need something that has longer range, because anything coming at us would probably be most deadly unless we thought it was.
I think at the same time, we need all countries in NATO have to have a more effective drone defense than firing a $2 million missile at a $50,000 drone. Because as we've seen in Ukraine and we're seeing in Iran, cheap drones can do a lot of damage.
Well, and that's the Iron Dome that we're talking about now. So therefore, getting weaponry that can shoot down, those drones is the key. So therefore, I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, okay, not only would we power up places that are not inhabited, power up places that are struggling with water, clean water, and energy and power spikes and all those other things, we'd create a grid that also would actually help our defense. So then I started looking around, I'm thinking, okay, who's doing this? Well, you know what? There are some people that are doing it really well, which, it's interesting. And it's a shame that we haven't really thought about it. And, as I'm going through, I'm going to put up some of the pictures because folks at home, they might not understand what like a laser drone strike would look like. But, Israel's been working on this for quite a while, and they've got a prototype in place of a truck with laser technology on it. Lockheed Martin and the Americans that worked on it for years, they've for the most part, what they've reported, they've abandoned it. So they couldn't figure out a way. And, our U.S. neighbors, they do a lot of things really well. They don't do energy really well. They've struggled with energy in their power grid and everything else. So they haven't been, world leaders in energy by any stretch. That's why now you're seeing conversations where Trump gets up there and he goes, I'm going to give the AI guys the ability to build their own power generation systems and everything else, because he knows he doesn't have any of it to build.
But it does take up an enormous amount of energy, artificial intelligence, does it not?
It does. Oh, yeah. Well, and that's why he's saying let them build it. But he wants to also, as they build it, he wants to use it.
Oh, right, of course.
In order to keep his costs down. Because for the U.S. being the size of the nation it is, and number of people, to build a full new power grid, and where he is in his debt, he doesn't have the infrastructure to do it.
No.
Right? So that's why they're thinking. So then as I'm going through it, I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, okay, that's our next move, isn't it, Jim?
Well, and for a lot of different reasons. A few months ago, the Americans experimented putting a small portable nuclear reactor in the back of a transport plane and flying it to a remote base, because up until now they used diesel generators.
Yeah.
Diesel runs out. And they're thinking, wait a second, what if we got a small portable nuclear reactor to power a remote base of a few hundred people, men and women running a military installation? These small nuclear reactors have been powering U.S. aircraft carriers for 60 years.
Yeah.
And it cleans desalinized water. It's their energy. It's blah, blah, blah. They've been doing it in submarines. So the technology, and I remember speaking to Stephen Lecce about this, the technology is getting to the point, especially with CANDU, that they can make a smaller version of it to power not as many people as a big area like Southern Ontario or the Montreal corridor, but a small rural area could easily be powered with a small reactor. And with that, they could have civil things with it. They could use it for military purposes. They could use it for multiple purposes.
Right.
They could have energy to remote Indigenous locations, to remote towns. And if they need it for the military, it's accessible right there.
And then at the end of the day, we use it for defense of our borders.
Oh, yeah.
So it becomes our defense mechanism. So, you know, we already have, think about all the things that are on our plate. We have the technology, we have the brain power, we have the resources, we have the uranium, we have all the precious metals. So quite frankly, we're already equipped to do this. This isn't something we need to be relying on anyone else. And that was, you know, it's interesting. Britain right now, if you listen to the conversation in Britain, what's their biggest complaint?
They can't afford anything.
They can't afford anything, and they're dependent on France, who already made the leap to go to nuclear for a nuclear deterrent from a weapon perspective.
And a power.
And power. So now they're beholding on two fronts. We've made the capital investment to get into this already. Because as Canadians, Ontarians, whatever you want, any province you want, we've made the jump.
And Paul, there's another benefit for Mark Carney and the Liberals. So Carney has the announcement today on the 26th that they've reached the 2% threshold for GDP for NATO. Mm-hmm. All he has to do is start folding in the cost of these modular reactors to remote military purposes, and that adds to the budget.
Exactly.
But all of a sudden you can say, well, I'm using it for this base and that base, but then we have extra, so we give it to these people as well.
Exactly. And there's the strategy, Jim. See, that, and you know, we started off the show saying, you know, a line by line analysis. That's the strategy I want to see now. And I'm like, okay, you know, you're there, you're on the podium, you got the good photo up, you got your PR adjusting, you're talking to us about some good initiatives. Now, break the line items down, tie it into a strategy, get it to somewhere, and then let's get it into play. And now I'm like, okay, now I'm with you. Now I'm there. I'm
Paul, the average Canadian, they see that and they go, okay, that town's going to have a clean, accessible energy now. Oh, that Indigenous reserve that has been struggling will now have access to this, and we can use it for the military. Great. Yep. As an average Canadian, you're like, the military wins. Our Indigenous First Nations people win. The small town people, remote Canada win. How do I say no to that?
Yeah. And you know what? Today he's there. You know, it's funny. You walked in when the press conference was going on. First thing you said to me, where is it being held? Nova Scotia.
In Halifax.
Halifax. Yeah. You said to me, the people of Halifax are going to ask, how many jobs, what's in it for me, whatever. Next question that came, I think it was the third or fourth question, The reporter says, how many jobs are going to come to Halifax? How many, right? And you were bang on. You picked that one right off so fast. I was laughing because I'm like, of course, right? Of course.
I have family there. I used to live in the Annapolis Valley in the height of the recession in the 80s. I have family in Truro. There's approximately just under 1 million people in Nova Scotia. New Brunswick has less. You know, PEI obviously has less. But any infrastructure, any industry, any jobs to that area is invaluable to their bottom line, their tax base, their GDP, to the economy of the area. And I mean, it didn't used to be like this, but you can drive down Halifax and Moncton and other cities of the Maritimes and see tent cities, see the unhoused, because they have nowhere to go.
Oh, I know. I read about that over the winter. There are people in tent cities over the winter in Halifax.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's not far from the Navy base, Paul.
Well, so Shannon Park or whatever. Yeah, I know. I saw that.
If there's a huge economic benefit to the Halifax, Dartmouth area and Nova Scotia, and all the different jobs that go with it, and all the ancillary benefits from those jobs and everything else to help the province, it's a win-win. And a place like Nova Scotia, a place like Halifax, they could really use that win.
Yeah. Well, there we did it. We tied the bow.
Yeah.
See, this is the cool part about this discussion. And I hope they watch it because, quite frankly, we tied the bow on it. We actually came up with a strategy. This strategy ties into a number of pillars, a number of the ecosystem of Canada. Makes sense.
But Paul, I go back to Carney's last 35, 40 years of his life in business. Bank of Canada, Bank of England, all the different hedge funds he's worked for, all the different huge companies. As a head, you didn't tell everyone what you were doing. You would tell them, excuse me, what they need to know.
Yeah.
So this is what you need to know. Then you go back into your 11th floor huge office and do your business. But as a prime minister, as Canadian, the media and the public, they do need to know. You do need to explain it to them. So it's not like running Brookfield or running the Bank of England. You can't keep these secrets and just tell people what they need to know, and I'll keep everything else to myself. Just explain it to us. Canadians are pretty understanding that way. If you explain it that way, you're like, oh, okay, that's good. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's a tough, listen, I think everyone gets it, but the more I watch, the new political landscape that these guys are under, it's so tough.
Would you want to do it?
I wouldn't want to do it. No, because not only do you have to be an expert in the economy of Canada, you also have to be an expert in all the different fields that people rely on, and that's so hard.
International relations, the environment.
Well,
you name it.
Look at what we're talking about. We're talking energy and defense interconnecting.
Yeah,
very complicated, but quite frankly, essential to the country's future. It's in your hands, and you have to depend on the people that are around you know enough to drive that ball, and that's building that team. That's the succession plan and the building of the team of your ministers to make that happen. And I thought today, he did a good job. I think there's some missing pieces, but I really do think, more information from the minister, I think we need right now, and to tie the strategy together and make it make sense. So we all, when we hear it, we're like, okay, we're about to spend $60 billion. It's a big amount of money for Canada right now. We are making a big jump.
We haven't spent that much ever.
So that's fine. Give us some comfort that it's actually strategically going into something at a reasonable level, and there's going to be spin-off benefits. We're going to do more shows, on Equinor, on the Norway public energy company, and or gas company. But when we do it, you're going to see pros and cons, but you're going to see a government that created a strategy that created a significant amount of wealth for their country and how they did it. And I really think with nuclear and the way we have and the advances we made, we can take that and we can use it almost in a similar way to extend the wealth and security of Canada.
And think about if we start tapping into that stream of money into the public coffers. What if we can now tell someone graduating high school that we will cover 50% of your cost if you're going to be a teacher or a nurse or in healthcare? 50% of your cost will cover to make it easier for you to become a new teacher, because the country's desperate for nurses, teachers, doctors, education, like you name it, all those professions. We're short staffed. We'll cover half the cost because we're making all this money through all our different energy projects.
Exactly.
There's no Canadian that would vote against that.
Well, and on top of it, we still today the announcement, and I know you say they're trying, but we're still only up 13% on recruitment for the military.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, let's get this higher. Like, we have all these people out here. We have a lot of young people that are actually looking for something to do. There's got to be an incentive for that, get them in the armed forces, to get them going, to learn their trade. This morning, all over the press, we're now seeing a massive decline in skilled trades.
Absolutely.
It's all over the place. We're talking about it. The U.S. is talking about it. It's in every...
I think every Western country is dealing with it.
Exactly. It's terrible right now. They're retiring. They're dropping off. Since COVID, they've disappeared. Even more have now disappeared with the slowdown on real estate. So when we come out of this, are we going to have any skilled trades? We don't have work for them right now. We can create work for them in the armed forces. We can move them there. They can learn their trade. When the economy picks up, they can come out and they can actually open their own companies.
And have some money in the bank.
Have some money in the bank, buy homes, and create the economy. But that's the full circle. That's the ecosystem that we need communication.
And that's what, if McGuinty, the defense minister, and Carney today said, and by the way, at the same time, we're putting infrastructure money into recruit training bases in Western Canada, another one in Central Canada, another one. So we're going to have 4 or 5 of them, and triple or double the amount of recruits that are matriculated through our system every month, and that would put a significant increase in the amount of people being trained.
But to me, that's not the prime minister. The prime minister is the guy who steps up and he says, "Here's the 3,000-foot strategy view," right?
And that's McGuinty then doing that.
Comes in and he says, "Okay, here's we're building this many barracks. We're hiring this many people. We have this many companies. We're building this much. Here's the line items that tie to that, and here's the milestone, and here's where we're going." And if you look at, again, I hate to use Norway as an example,
but they're a great example.
But they do that, right? When you look at their projects, they publicly tell the people what the milestones are, what the timeline is, where they're going, what they're investing in. And so much so that they were so confident that over the years, they really took the private-public approach to that company. So now it's mostly owned by the government, but you can invest in that company to make money for your own retirement fund, your own wealth. And that they wanted everyone to participate.
And the flip side here in Canada now, in the last 3 weeks, this is my one criticism for Carney and McGuinty and the Liberal government right now. We're finding out about Canadian military involvement around the world through different media outlets. There was La Presse in Montreal. There was a story about Canadians and Kadena Air Force Base in Okinawa doing some patrol work in North Korea. That was released through Japanese and South Korean newspapers, not by. So I think a lot of Canadians are like, well, wait a sec. Shouldn't the Canadian government let us know what's happening if we have men and women overseas doing different work?
Yeah.
Why is it a secret? Why do we find out through other people? And so, like going back to, if you explain things, people go, oh, okay, great. That's awesome.
Yeah, it makes sense. Strategically, it makes sense, right? But there's probably a good reason why they're there. Just tell us and tie it into something. And
you can't say it's security reasons if Japanese and South Korean newspapers are reporting on it. So, so it's obviously a news story. So we're allowed to talk about it. They're there.
It's hard to hide the people.
It's hard to hide it, right? So, but yeah, so at the end of the day, just some simple explanations. I don't need all the minutia. Just tell us the Coles notes, what's going on, and get about it and get on with it. Yeah. And then everyone would be happy.
Jim, there is a strategy here. I hope they watch the show because I think there is a strategy here. Yeah. I really do believe. I'm getting ready for this show. I think, again, there's some shows we do where I'm like, we're just kind of reporting and talking about stuff.
Yeah.
This one, as I finished the show, I said to myself, if they're not on it right now, they need to really think this through.
They have picked up on a few of our ideas over the last few months, and I hope they pick up on this one.
I noticed that, yeah.
Thanks.
Patriotic means looking out for each other and fixing things together.
True patriotism is being in the country you love, surrounded by people you love, and great weather.
Being a patriot is being a part of your community and caring for it.
It doesn't matter who you are or where you're from. Patriotism is the one thing we all share.
It's okay to be critical of government and still be a patriot.
It's gratitude to your country.
Of course I'm a patriot. I'm Canadian. It's my home.
Well, actually, true patriot love is the mission.